Hello YouTube, welcome back to another video. In today's video, I'll be building a new collection shelf, so let's go ahead and get started. So if you remember back to 2023, I built this collection shelf right here because the old collection shelves that were here were running out of space. I thought that this shelf would hold up for quite some time, but here we are, out of room again. You can see that pretty much every inch of this is taken with the exception of a few. We're starting to stack alarms again. Really not great. So I'm gonna build another shelf right here. You can see we have this cabinet thing, we have this extinguisher, but it's standing on top of these two little drawer things. Originally there was just like parts and wiring in there, which I just moved somewhere else. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna build a shelf that spans about this wide. I might even put this stuff back on the top level of the shelf if I feel like it's stable enough, although I might have to move these somewhere else. But let's go ahead and get started. Go to the home improvement store of your choice. I happen to be Team Orange for lumber, and pick out some straight 2x4s. You're going to need 5 of them. Try to find ones that aren't warped and don't have too many knots, because we're going to be resawing these, so they do really have to be straight. Unfortunately, the price of lumber has gone up. Also, if you don't have any 2x3s, you're going to pick out 2 2x3s. I happen to already have those at home. I'm also picking out lumber for a second project, which is why I have more than necessary. I went ahead and drew out a plan of what I'm going to build. You can see it's actually very similar to a shelf I built back in December. I'll try and insert a picture here if I remember. But this is about half of that because it's obviously going to fit a smaller space. It's going to be 50 3/4 inches tall. You can see there's going to be 5 shelf platforms, 37 inches wide. So that's going to be exactly 37 inches to fit that space. The bottom shelf is going to be 11 inches tall, so I can fit boxed items and put some storage down there. The rest of them are just going to be 9 inches. And then, of course, 3/4 is the boards, because that's what half of a 2x4 is. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start chopping up some 2x4s at 37 inches, and then we're going to resaw them with the table saw. Let's go ahead and measure our first 37. So 37 is right here. We'll go ahead and cut. Last time I made a shelf, I made the mistake of just ripping down each 2x4 and then cutting it with a miter saw. That was a mistake because, first of all, there's a lot of scrap when you cut, because obviously not the entire length of the 2x4 is used. So it's just kind of a waste to resaw all that and do all that work when you're not even going to be using it. So that's why, actually, if you look under here, I have all this scrap here, and it's completely useless because I can't reuse them as like 2x4s. Because they're all like cut up now and I really have nothing to do with them. So at least if you do this, all the scrap you have is still in usable 2x4s that you can use for blocking or whatever. Go ahead and line up that blade and make the cut. My shelf needs 10 of these 37-inch sections, so I will get 2 of those out of each 2x4. I'll have some waste left over, but I'll save all of that. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and resaw my 2x4s. This is a pretty dangerous job. You should definitely not do this, especially since this could damage your saw if your saw doesn't have enough power for this. Also, it's a pretty high kickback risk, so just be aware of that. In this case, my saw has done this in the past, so I do know that it can handle it, but just be aware that there's a lot of risk associated with this. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn on my vacuum and we'll get started. So the cut quality isn't ideal. Obviously you're gonna get some blade marks, but I honestly don't care that much. I think that's fine since the shelf I'm making is gonna be fairly rough. So now I'm just gonna go ahead and do that again many more times. I think I might actually start making 2 passes per cut, so we'll try that next. Went ahead and did this to all 10 boards. It was quite dusty. It actually looked like it was snowing. This is probably the most time-consuming part of the project because you have to push the wood pretty slowly so that way the saw doesn't bind up. You don't want to ruin the saw by pushing too hard. The saw's already working really hard to cut these, but also at the same time you don't want to push too slow because then the blade's going to make marks and burn the wood. So that was the last piece. We're basically good here, so now it's time to start the assembly process. Looks like it snowed in like July. Surprisingly, these didn't come out too bad at all. They don't have too many blade marks on them, so pretty happy with that. Good stuff. Look at all the dust the vacuum collected. Could probably put this in a fire extinguisher and spray it. It's so fine. So this is how each shelf is gonna look. So I gotta assemble this. So I'm gonna cut a few of these 2x3s that I already resawed previously. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut 14-inch sections, 2 on each end to tack each of these together. Same deal, we'll go ahead and line it up with this handy dandy shadow blade guide thing. And then make our cut. So of course I am 1 off. So actually that might be a positive thing because it means I finally get to use these slats right here. So I just took one out and now I'm gonna cut this at 14 and then I'll rip it down to a 2x3 with the saw. All right, now we have 10 and I finally got to use one of those. So we can go ahead and start putting these together. So I just clamped a scrap 2x4 to the end and I'm gonna line up 4 of these boards, grab one of our pieces that we cut and then slide that over here. And then now we can start drilling holes and putting in screws. Went ahead and did this with the other shelf platforms. I used about 60 deck screws for this. I was gonna use drywall screws, but I opted for deck screws. Shelf platforms are done. I'm really actually happy with how these came out. I think it looks pretty nice. So now I'm gonna go ahead and probably sand it because there's a lot of imperfections and also I wanna get that off. But then after that, what I'm gonna start doing is cutting these supports. So generally I would rip down 2x3s or resaw 2x3s to get the stands for the shelf. But these are actually part of an old bed frame that someone salvaged for me. And if you look closely, I think they're made out of furniture grade plywood, which means they should have some pretty decent vertical strength. I'm gonna go ahead and use them because they actually do look pretty nice. I'm gonna cut off the part at the end where it was stapled into the frame. This can go somewhere. I made a mark 50 3/4, so let's go ahead and make our cut whenever it's lined up. It's time for some sanding, so I have my orbital sander. Just get all that ink and stuff off. It's time to begin the assembly process. I brought everything down to the basement because this is where the shelf is going to be. So I have these 11-inch spacer blocks. This is going to make it a lot easier to assemble the shelf because it'll be perfectly level. So now I'm going to start putting on the supports. So I distinctly remember that the last time I did this type of project, it was really a pain to get this in because the wood kept splitting and it was just nasty. So hopefully it doesn't happen this time, but I am prepared if it does. So I'm definitely going to want to pre-drill because this is some very, very fragile stuff. Very carefully. I used a countersink bit for the rest of the holes just to make the finish nicer and also to avoid splitting the wood. I also used a level just to make sure that the shelf platforms weren't going to be crooked. This was a lot more smooth than the last time I built a shelf like this. We have our last screw. And we're officially done. So you can see it's all nice and level. Here is the finished shelf. I actually really like how this one came out. The other one was not perfectly straight and stuff like that because I didn't use any spacers, but this one is nice and level, nice and square, all true. I'm actually really happy with how this thing turned out. You can see we have our shelf platforms, 5 of them. Yeah. Here's the finished product. You can see it actually did come out really nice. I think this one's better than the other shelf I made because this one's actually like, you know, straight. But yeah, it looks nice. I might stain it or something like that, although probably not necessary because this is going to be sitting inside all the time. But maybe it'll look better if I do that. Overall, here's the whole thing. So now let's go ahead and move it. Now there's a sister shelf to this one over here, and here's the moment of truth. Does it fit? It does. You can see specifically made to fit that space, so we can start putting stuff on it. Went ahead and put everything on the shelf, decorated the top, put the lamp back on. I really like how this came out. It's really nice looking. It adds something to the space. Overall, pretty good build. It cost me about 20 bucks worth of lumber, but again, I did have a lot of stuff at home. But if you have the tools to do so and you have some lumber, then it's definitely a good idea to build your own stuff because it's fun and you can make it exactly how you want it. So thank you for watching. If you're going to build something like this yourself, good luck. And if you have any questions, leave it in the comment section below. I'll try to respond. Other than that, though, that's pretty much it. So thank you for watching and take care.